Welcome to Notes from the Underground with your host, Debra Jayne East, and commentaries by myself, Derek Tyler. Nothing is really as it seems these days. In order to get to the bottom line, you have to go underground, where men and women search for answers, risking their lives to bring you the truth.
Hello everyone, this is Debra Jayne East, and I'm excited to be here this evening. I've waited, it seems like a long time, to get back in the saddle again, and I'll have to say I'm very excited to be on such a great network. The owner that I happened to meet, I guess it's probably over a year ago, he is in charge, I guess you would say, of PSN Radio Network, and his name is Angel, and how we met was really strange. I had a radio show called Skywatcher Radio in a little town called Pilot Mountain, and I've been doing that for like a couple of years. And I think we were on Facebook, and I thought, there's Skywatcher Radio. And I thought, how can that be? Because I'm Skywatcher Radio. And it turned out, we both had the same name, and well, fair is fair. He had his longer than I did, so I changed my name over to Starlight 17. But a few months ago, I, found myself radio homeless, and I wasn't quite sure, if I wanted to get back in the saddle so quick, because it's actually it's a lot of hard work. And I've been in ufology for it actually started when I was 12 years old. And saw my first UFO with my parents and my sisters in a little town called Hillsville, Virginia. And once you ever see one, you never forget it. And it was at midnight. Our dog was barking. My dad told all of us to go outside, and when we went, we just looked up over the hill and we saw the largest disc-shaped object. It was as big as a tractor trailer, with rotating lights, and I had never seen anything like that. We just stood in a trance and didn't really say anything for a while. In fact, our dog was the only thing that made any racket. So that's how I got introduced into the strange and unknown. And once you see something like that, it stays with you. And had a couple more sightings, and one was in 1987. That was a big UFO flap, and my parents had a house close to, I kid you not, it's called Coon Ridge. It's close to Hillsville, Virginia. And they, for entertainment, they had those old-timey police scanners. And every night they would listen to see what's going on in the community, and if, there was an accident somewhere, they should watch out for if they went to town, That's what you did for entertainment when you didn't have internet. So they started noticing that there were a lot of call-ins about strange objects in the sky. And my dad, he thought that was pretty interesting, because after seeing UFOs, around a couple of our homes, he believed in them. I mean, he didn't say a whole lot, but he definitely knew that they weren't anything that we had. So what happened was, after about 100 sightings in a week at Whitful, Danny Gordon, who was the newscaster there, was getting ready to sign off on a show, and he got a phone call from the local sheriff. And the sheriff said, "We are getting swamped with phone calls about strange lights in the area. So you might want to go check that out. It might be like a humorous story, like crazy lights and things like that." So Danny went and talked to the local law enforcement, who had actually saw the lights. And they said, "We don't know what they are. It's not really something like a hoax." Because he was one of the guys in the sheriff's department was retired military. So Danny and the sheriff, they sat and talked a little bit. They decided they would go out and see what they could find, if these people were making it up or if it was something, that our military had that just wasn't being identified. Well, they first went to stop at a local mall to pick up a pair of binoculars. And while they were there at the mall, a huge UFO the size of a bus came over the Wistful Mall. There were tons of people there. They all saw it. A school bus full of kids, they were there. They saw it. And it just felt like, I remember reading Danny's book. It's called Don't Look Up. He said it felt like Groundhog Day. He said because everywhere you went, they were looking up in the sky, looking at the UFOs. So that was really strange. My parents said that one night after a lot of sightings, our dog started barking again. It was a different dog. So he said, I felt like I should get up and go downstairs and see what it is. So he got up and he walked down the steps, and all of a sudden he said he had a sense of foreboding, like you shouldn't be getting up, you should go back, and you don't want to go down there. Well, the next thing my dad remembered, he was waking up in his bed. And he sort of forgot everything about, the night before and hearing all the strange sounds and stuff. So he got up and he said he put his, got dressed, had breakfast, and put his boots and everything on. Decided to walk off his property. Well, when he went down to the lower field, there had been a heavy frost on that night. There were 3 pod-shaped, like kidney bean-shaped marks in a triangle formation in the field, about 9 feet apart. It definitely looked like something had been sitting there for most of the night, because if you have a frost and you got like something in your yard that's not supposed to be, and then you get up in the morning and you pick it up, it leaves a place on the grass, where if you had a planter or something like that, it leaves marks on the grass. Well, nobody could figure out what left these imprints. So the neighbors came over. Soon the sheriff's department found out, so they came over. They took pictures and readings, and it was about a week later, people from the newspaper came. And then they had a visit from 2 men who said they worked at a newspaper. They were dressed in suits. I kid you not, they were dressed in suits. And they went around, they took photographs and took soil samples and things like that. So that was pretty odd. And, I moved to North Carolina, had a couple of sightings down there years apart, and didn't really connect everything all together that, gee, everywhere I go, my family's seeing UFOs. Over long spans of time, you just don't really put all that together. But that's one of the things that, I started thinking about. And when I retired from social work, my kids, they were all up, out of the house and gone. It just bit me. I got bit by the UFO bug. I thought, this gets more interesting by the day because there's more advanced technology to check out UFOs and things like that. And it would be a fun hobby to do. So that's how I got started in radio. And Skywatcher Radio was my first radio show. Had an office in Pilot, broadcast out there. Oh man, I remember rainy nights, lightning, thunder, and here I am sitting in that little office with my headset on, trying to speak with somebody over in England about their UFO case. And it's frustrating, let me tell you. Being a researcher doesn't pay a lot of money, not unless you wrote a big, huge, best-selling book. Then, you might make some money and you go to conferences. But for the most part, being a radio host doesn't really pay anything. You pay, actually. And it's frustrating because, just like this evening, I've had some problems with audio. And different times, Skype won't work. And you try to give it up. You say, well, let somebody else do it. But if you are a true believer in extraterrestrial life, And you know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we are not alone. And you know that this country is hiding all the information that they have about UFO technology, and that they are keeping secrets from you. It starts to affect you, because keeping this technology hidden is crippling America. If they have the technology for zero energy, because, you know, a lot of the UFOs, you know, you see them streak across the sky, and I'm sure they're using something other than what we use to power a lot of our craft. It can make a difference in this world. And we have a right to know. You know, being an American citizen, being a human on Earth, we have a right to know what goes on around us. So that's a little bit of background about myself. And my guest tonight, who for some reason he hasn't shown up yet, and I did speak with him yesterday, and he's always a great guest. I don't know if there's an issue that came up or not, but we'll just go ahead and talk a little bit and learn some things about each other, and maybe he'll show up. But if he doesn't, that's okay, because I wanted to get to know you, all the listeners out there. And it makes me wonder, what is it about UFOs that has your interest? I know Derek Savory, the thing that's so interesting about him is that he lives close to Rendlesham Forest. And over there, you know, everybody knows that back in January of 2012, all the people in Derek Savory's, little community, what happened is Derek, his son Matthew, and his brother Andrew, they went out for a hike at the forest because they wanted to retrace the landing site where Larry Warren had shown them a week earlier. And if you're over there and you live in that area, you know all of the researchers, you know everybody by name. I know Derek, he knows just about everybody. He says that people from all over the world have come over there to Rendlesham to check the site out and to see what's going on. So that's why they were back in the woods that night. They wanted to retrace that landing site. So they all got ready, and they got in their car and went out there. And they had a big drop in temperature. I think he said it was about 10 to 12 degrees. And they experienced a paranormal event. It's called shadow soldiers. I don't know if you've heard about the shadow soldiers, but basically it's just, the description says it all. You can't really see a face. It's sort of a darkness. I don't know if their image is shielded from you. If you, for some reason, you know, it's some kind of mind control that you can't actually see what they are. But Derek was terrified. And so was his son. Now, stories like these, they always interest me a whole lot. Because men, for the most part, you know, they don't really get afraid of a whole lot of things. But to actually go into a forest with your family and see things like this that terrorize you and make you just be in a state of shock, I mean, it takes a whole lot of guts for a man to say that. That's why I've always respected Derek, because his story has never changed. But I will say that being a UFO grandma is kind of cool. When my grandson Caden went to kindergarten, first thing he said, you know, we all went there, you know, to tell him to have a good day and all that kind of stuff, and first thing he does, he points at me, you know, standing in the background, and said, "That's my grandma. She likes UFOs and flying saucers." So that's how I got my introduction to his school. And you get a lot of strange looks and stuff, but, you know, that's okay. After a while, it just comes along with the territory. But one thing I will say, I have met some of the most fascinating people I have ever encountered being a researcher and interviewing guests. I don't think they're as any top-notch guest that I haven't interviewed. I've interviewed them all. But I tell you what's really fascinating is to find someone that nobody has ever heard about. Somebody that has had an experience and they've never told anybody. And you're the first one that they explain their experience to. I know I got an email message from this man. He was from Ghana. And he listened to my radio show. And the first thing he said was, "I want to thank you." And I thought, well, why is he thanking me? I haven't really done anything. He said, he was 79 at the time when he was calling me. When he was a young boy, when he was only 9 years old, he was walking with his parents out to a big field. And it was early in the morning, and they were going there, to work in their crops and stuff. He said when they walked up over the hill, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a huge, glowing, disc-shaped object. And being a little kid, he was too afraid to, say anything. He just stood there. He said, "I almost wet my pants." He said that's how terrified I was, because we had never seen anything like that. He said his father looked at him, got hold of his hand, and he said, "We're going to go back home today. We're not going to go to the field. We're going to do something else." He said his father didn't acknowledge what they saw. They never spoke about it again. But he said, "I always wondered what that was that made my father's face turn white as a sheet." So he said, "You talked about seeing an object that was so similar to what I saw." He said, all these years, I sometimes wondered if I was a little crazy. And he said, now I know that I wasn't crazy at all. That's what it's really all about, is to find a sense of belonging in all this strangeness that we have out there. Because they see these things every day. I mean, all over the world, there has been millions and millions of sightings of UFOs. I'm talking about just in every country from all walks of life. We're talking about astronauts. We're talking about presidents. Little kids, they went close to schoolyards. There hasn't been really anybody that has been spared a visit or a sighting of a UFO. So there are stories out there. There is evidence out there. Whether anybody would believe it or not, that's another story. But I want to know if any of you out there listening have had a UFO experience. And if you have, you can call in and talk with me right now. I guess I'm not quite sure what PSN's policy is for phone calls, but if you're out there and you want to call and tell me about your experience, then please give us a call. The number is 786-245-8127. And it would be great just for you to be able to get it out. So don't be afraid. That's one thing I want to emphasize. I don't really care if anybody thinks I'm crazy, because I'm a Southern girl. They think we're crazy anyhow. They think we're crazy anyhow. So why be worried what anybody thinks? What's important is, what do you think about yourself? I have met abductees that have carried these burdens on their shoulders for years and years, and they haven't told anybody. And they may not realize that they have been an abductee. I have found that to be the truth. In so many cases, they have all the symptoms of abductees, and they may have a fear of doctors. They may not want to go out at night in a car. I know one time when I went to a UFO conference in Arkansas, I went to hear Sherry Wild, who wrote a really great book about her UFO experiences. But I was sitting in the back, and there was a mailman. He probably was 80, he was in his 80s, he was like 82, 83. And he was sitting there with his daughter, who was around 35, I guess. And I introduced myself, and I, told him what I was, that I was a radio host and a researcher. And I was there to meet some friends and to find out some more information. So I asked him, I said, "Why are you here?" He said, "I was a mail carrier for 42 years. He said, 1 month, he said, every single evening on this old, windy, deserted road that I had to carry mail to, he said, every evening, there were lights that followed me. He said, it was like clockwork. I would be delivering the mail, and he said, I would look back and I would see that light. And he said, it took me 4 or 5 years to realize that a few of those times when I got back home, it was really late. He said, I usually got off my shift by 6 o'clock. He said, there were a couple of times that I pulled in my driveway and it was almost 10. He said, and I never knew that something could have happened to me or that I might have been abducted. He said, why would they want an old guy like me? And when he talked to me, he just had a sincerity on his face. He had tears welled up in his eyes. His daughter was there beside him, and she sort of patted him on the shoulder, and she said, all his life, he has been an unbeliever in UFOs. She said, my dad has the most common sense of any human being you could ever hope to be around. She said, nothing really perturbs him. But she said, he's been different. He's been different since he experienced this. And he's looking for answers. And she said, I wanted to come here so he could talk to some people and maybe get some things off his chest. That really affected me. It affected this man. There are so many out there who contact me and ask me, do you think this is real? Yes, of course I do. I've seen the effect that it's had on humanity, that it's had on little children, that it's had on myself. And nobody is coming forth and saying it's okay. They're out there. We can see them. We don't know all the details, but they do exist. You're not crazy. Nobody has had the guts to come out and say that. So, my hat's off to you, all you people out there who come forward and who speak about what they see and talk about it. You are more of a hero than anybody I know. And just want to do a little station break right now. You're listening to PSN Radio. And this is Debra Jayne East for Notes from the Underground. And I bet you didn't think I could talk for 30 minutes straight, did you? Well, I can. I can talk up a storm, as my grandma would say.
And I feel the power. The hills have eyes and are coming true.
Imagine no longer being tied down to your computer, but having the freedom to take live talk radio with you anywhere you go. TalkStream Live introduces our first ever iPhone application. The talk shows you follow now follow you. And your iPhone is now the fastest and easiest way to stay connected to the best talk radio on the internet. Listen to live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Mobile talk radio from TalkStream Live. Now available in the iTunes App Store.
Put a team of professional consultants behind your home or business computer with Key Information Solutions, providing solutions to your internet and computing needs while keeping you on the cutting edge of technology. Preventative maintenance and networking support, hardware and custom-built computers. Let Key Information Solutions be your personal tech staff for your home or office with affordable hourly, monthly, or annual rates to fit anyone's budget. Call Key Information Solutions now. 954-973-3374. That's 954-973-3374. Or visit keyinformation.com.
Up in the sky.
It's a bird.
It's a plane. No, it's SupermanHomepage.com, the #1 Superman fan site in the world. SupermanHomepage.com, covering the world of Superman from the 1930s to today. News, reviews, rumors, and reports. SupermanHomepage.com for all your Superman comics, TV shows, movies, cartoons, radio shows, and more. Everything you ever wanted to know about the Man of Steel and more. SupermanHomepage.com.
And we're back. This is Debra Jayne East, and this is Notes from the Underground. And I have somebody else that's going to be co-hosting with me every once in a while, and he's also going to be doing some documentaries. He has a book that's coming out in a few weeks, and his name is Derek Tyler. His book is called Alien Contact, The Difficult Truth. And I've helped him some with this book, did some reading and helped him do a little bit of research here and there. Probably one of the more fascinating books that I've ever read from an abductee. And I have no idea. I tell you what, it was my lucky day when I came across him. I put an ad on Facebook in several groups and asked if there was anybody out there that had had a UFO experience. And I got a lot of weird emails. I think some of these people were, been partying too much or something because their reports weren't very consistent. But what happened was, back in the 80s, he had a UFO sighting in his hometown. And he said, without a shadow of a doubt, he knew after this sighting that no one could ever tell him that UFOs didn't exist. So, after that sighting, he worked in an online chat room and started a group for abductees. So I'm not going to tell you his whole story because I want him to tell you about that when he's able to come online. But he ended up working with Bud Hopkins, interviewed 2,000 to 3,000 abductees, and also met some, I guess you would say, people in the know from different resources, secret resources from the military, and got taken under the wing of a couple of these people who were not satisfied with what our government was doing in regards to disclosure and extraterrestrials. So he's going to be coming in and doing a few things and talking about different subjects, his book. He's also an extremely good person for conspiracy theories. He does one of the best talks on 9/11 that I've ever heard. In fact, the last show that I did with him, people that were listening to the show and that were in the chat room, everybody remembers where they were at on that day. And hearing him talk about it and all of the facts of the investigation really still angers a whole lot of Americans. So I thought it would be good if we just didn't cover ufology, but we did some conspiracy stuff, because a lot of that is related to ufology. and what's going on in some of our secret space programs. We have chemtrails. We have a lot of new diseases that have been really creeping a lot of people out. We have Morgellons, which I understand Joni Mitchell has. You know, she was a singer, very popular back in my time. Not going to tell you how long ago, because then you might learn I was 60 years old, so. I was just picking, I don't really care. But yeah, a lot of people have this disease, and they're tracing it to some type of nanotechnology. They said they find insect larvae in it. They find human blood cells, red blood cells. So what's up with that? So all of these conspiracies, you know, it's been years and years, you know, our government has said chemtrails are not real, they don't exist. Well, when I was flying across country one time, and I was up as high as we were up as high as the jet could go. We were way above cloud cover. We were just cruising along, there were clouds down below us. And I just happened one time when we were going on a little bit of incline to get a little bit higher, looked up above the plane. I counted 14 rows of chemtrails. And it was in the crisscross formation, which if you're out there and you know anything about that type of stuff, they do that. They do it like tic-tac-toe because it spreads out in a grid, and that way they are sure that the whole area is covered. So I thought we should do some conspiracy. And the other thing, which is also related to ufology, is paranormal. I don't know about you out there, but I have experienced some paranormal things. You hear talk about orbs a whole lot. Well, not only have I photographed orbs in my home, and they've been around me, I have saw them in my yard, just not as a opaque image capture, which you see on a lot of the cameras and stuff, but it was the size of 2 50-cent pieces. That's about the size of it. And I was looking out in my front yard, and about 4 inches from the ground, about maybe 15 feet in front of me, was this glowing object. And it was only there for maybe 4 or 5 seconds, and it just disappeared. But I was able to take a photograph of it. And the weird thing is, my grass was just as green as it could be. Well, this golden-shaped orb reflected off of the grass, just like the grass was made out of glass or something like that, like metal. It made a reflection on the grass, which was very odd. So I put that away in the back of my head and thought, well, that's interesting. Wonder what that was. And posted it online one time, and everybody said, oh, it was a firefly. Well, I don't know about you, but in the South we have big things, but we do not have fireflies that weigh half a pound. I have never seen one that big. And plus it was in October, it was cold, and the fireflies only come out early in the summer when it's warm and the air is moist and stuff, so I know that's not what it was. But later, I was doing some research and read an article by Eve Lorgan saying that a lot of times just before an abduction or an attempt, that abductees will see a small flash of light out of the corner of their eye. And that brings me to my second story about the orbs or the flash of light. This was a couple of years ago, and I saw that little flash up in the corner of a room. And it was that very night that there was a abduction attempt on myself. You know, you would think that somebody that has studied this stuff all these years would put two and two together. But, you know, it's really hard to look at your life and when there's years and years in between things that happen to you and say, well, oh, that's why that happened. I must be an abductee. But I started looking at past events and speaking with other researchers who kept on sort of shaking their head and saying, you sound like you were abducted. And I thought, no, surely that couldn't be. But, well, I'll give you a little 10-minute scenario here. And you tell me if you don't think this is odd. Well, one night I was lying in bed. I was in my 20s and was getting ready to go to sleep. I lived in had a brand new 2-story house. It was brick. Behind my property, it was a small forest. The trees were taller than the house. Okay, the top floor was about maybe, I'm saying 20 feet from the ground. I mean, you couldn't climb up, you know, and shine a light in the window. You would have to have a ladder or something. And there were no roads or anything behind the house. It was a fenced-in backyard. And no traffic, anything like that. Well, that night, as I started to go to sleep, I glanced over at the window, and all of a sudden, the brightest light I've ever seen in my whole life shone through that window. It actually blinded me. That's how bright the light was. Oh, I see we might have a visitor. Derek Savory, is that you?
You talking about me?
Who is this?
This is, hi, my name is Paul. I'm
Well,
Wise
hi,
Frog,
Paul.
a.k.a. Arizona Tramp. I don't know if you've heard of me or not.
I don't think I have, but welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm just fine, and welcome to the on-air time here. It's good to hear you.
Oh, well, I'm glad. I'm getting a good induction here tonight. But you know what? You always got to prepare for the unexpected, and I always am. You know, I've heard so many stories from people all over the world. I can always talk about something. How about you?
Oh, well, I can too. I'm in the PSN chat, and I got the inkling to call into you there.
I'm glad.
You want to talk about abductions, or you just want to talk about sightings? Where do you want to go?
Well, I think the abduction story is the real deal here. And the reason why I think that is because I see the after effects of abductions, and very few people are being treated seriously for being abducted. I mean, a lot of them have post-traumatic stress syndrome, okay? They don't sleep. They have, if it's a guy, you know what happens to them. They usually are...
you end up losing your job because you can't deal with it. Yeah.
Right. And you can't talk to your wife or your husband about it because they think you're crazy. I've had many guys say, my wife just doesn't want me talking about this. She thinks I'm nuts. She says, don't talk about it in front of the company, you know, because we don't want to get those kinds of looks.
Yeah, the people who have not been abducted cannot deal with it. I've been abducted off and on when I was a child. I saw the cartoon characters, and that's how they would show up and appear to me, and then they'd take me away and bring me back. Later, when I was a teenager, they didn't come to me anymore as the cartoon characters. They would just bring me back, and I'd miss time, and I wouldn't remember what was going on. Then, as an adult, there was one time where I remember waking up on the ship, and I'm running down this silver hallway. The floor had the diamond-shaped grate, you know, and they projected into my mind that there was Morgan Freeman standing in front of me. Okay. Well, I know it was a projection, and because why would Morgan Freeman be on a UFO?
True.
And all of a sudden, I was yelling, and I remember yelling, but then it was like they made my mouth so I couldn't talk anymore, and it's kind of like in one of those movies where they just cover up your mouth and you can't speak. And the question he asked me is, do you really think that you're ready for this? And then I ended up back in my bed. And when I hit my bed, I ended up flopping up, off the bed and onto the floor.
Well, when they spoke to you, did they speak with their mouths, or was it telepathic?
It was telepathic. It was always telepathic. I don't know how to describe it. The doorways they just appear. If you think that you want to go in one direction, then a doorway appears. And you can turn around and there won't be a doorway there anymore.
Well, there are a lot of scientists who are talking about interdimensional beings and multiverses, which means that, for instance, this office that I'm in, I'm here physically, but also within this room could be interdimensional creatures who move, who their vibrational frequency is so high that they're moving so fast that I can't see them, and that we're both occupying the same space. But I have heard many people say that something appeared just out of the closet or in the corners, so obviously they can travel at will. I don't guess people expect them to be able to come like that. They always think, well, they're in their flying saucer or their UFO or whatever, but that's not necessarily true, is it?
Well, I've always been under the opinion that thought is faster than anything else in the universe, including light. So if you think it, you can be there, just like that.
Well, that's quantum physics for you. It basically says we create our own universe. And people can laugh about that, but let me tell you something. You remember when Star Trek came on and they had all this technology with phasers and they went to the galley and they could just press a button and it would manufacture whatever food that they thought of. There was a lot of different things that they did, and they had phasers and they had warp drive. Well, you know what? The joke's on us because they have all that technology now.
Yeah. I remember when the flip phone came out. And it's like, I want that. I want that because that was on Star Trek.
It was.
That's the only reason I ever wanted a cell phone. I hate cell phones. I hate texting.
Well, you know what? If we hear about technology now, I was really shocked when the 3D printers came out. I thought, wow, that is just so innovative. But several researchers told me if they're just coming out with it now, they've had it for 50 years or more. They keep that technology to themselves to use for their own purposes. And I have a friend of mine who says that we're 200 years behind what's actually out there. Well, that could be. I've heard between 75 to 100, for some things, but. Those people that do that kind of stuff, they're good at keeping secrets. You know why? They get paid well. They get paid
extremely well, and then they like to go around and keep people like myself quiet. So I've got stories I could tell you that...
Did you ever feel really condemned by some of your relatives or even... another employee? Did you ever feel like they thought, well, that's a nut job, I want to get away from them?
I never talked to anybody at work about what was going on with me, ever. When you drive a train, when you're an engineer, you don't talk like that because you're highly bonded and you go through hoops to get the job and you never want to lose it, so you don't want people to think you're a nutcase. However, my parents... I haven't talked to my mother in over 10 years. She can't deal with me. She can't deal with what's going on with me and the paranormal aspect of my life and the UFOlogy or whatever you want to call it. swearing on top of, it wouldn't matter. You could give me $1 million, $10 million, I'd tell you the same story, because it's happened to me. And my mom can't deal with that. She can't deal with her neighbors knowing that she's got an oddball for a son. So.
Well, that's exactly what I've been talking about. My heart goes out, to people. I consider myself a very decent person. I mean, I used to teach Sunday school. I worked at the health department, social worker. I always had a desire to help people. I mean, I get a little crazy every once in a while. You go do something silly, just to relieve stress or something. But for the most part, I try to be a productive part of humanity. And it is a big deal for me to come out and say, hey, I was abducted.
Right.
It's a big deal, and people don't respect the amount of courage. That's why I say, abductees, you are heroes. You are speaking out.
My wife, she tells me that I believe that you believe it. In other words, she doesn't want to call it, she doesn't think I'm lying. She believes that I believe what I'm saying, and that I wouldn't just come up with it. But she doesn't believe the story that I'm telling her, if you understand where I'm going.
Yeah, I do. It's their way of just sort of pacifying you, I think, They're saying, well, I believe that you believe this, but, it could have been something else just misidentified.
Right.
But, my friend that saw speaking about Derek Tyler's book, the craft that he saw was huge. It landed beside a hospital. There were 2 F-16s that were in pursuit of it, just like many people over in the UK. They see it a lot more over there, I think, than the citizens of the United States see. Our country knows that they're here. They show up on radar. And they're checking them out to see what, they're doing. And look at the pictures. There's pictures everywhere of UFOs, because of cell phones.
In 95 or 94, it was the summer that was really super hot. I'm looking out across the river. I was living in the 3rd story of my house. I looked out over the river. There's BP oil refinery, and there were 3 egg-shaped objects that were just shooting towards the refinery, and then they shot straight up into the air. And 1,500 people or so saw this, and the radio station comes on 10 minutes later and calls everybody an idiot and that they were all on drugs, so.
Drugs?
Yeah, we were all supposed to be high.
Oh, gosh. Well, sometimes people have to pacify themselves and tell themselves stories like that so that they won't feel the fear, But the time the last UFO sighting that I had, well, one of them, there was actually 2, was in the 90s. It was in Withville. And I lived close, to actually Mount Airy, North Carolina. Do you remember George Fawcett? He was a big UFO researcher back in the 60s and 70s.
No, ma'am.
They called him like the father of ufology. He did a lot of research, and he lived not far from me. Well, that night, my son came running in the door, and it was almost twilight, and my husband, and they said, Mom, come get in the car as fast as you can. There is a huge UFO. It is so big. We can see windows. It's not shaped like an airplane. You got to come. So I just jumped in and went up to the top of the hill. Well, the craft had risen probably up 1,000 feet, and it had been joined by 2 other craft that were exactly identical to it. Well, they stayed in a line, and they slowly swept from side to side like they were scanning, although I didn't see a light beam or anything. But the craft themselves had lights around them. And we followed them for maybe 2 miles. And out of the blue, they stopped. The 2 on either side shot off at like 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, perpendicular to each other. And within 4 seconds after they started moving, they were gone, out of sight. And there was the one craft left, and it just kept on scanning, and till it got out of sight.
Well,
now we don't have the
that's pretty
technology to do something like that. I mean, I have no idea how far that craft traveled, but I mean, just 4 seconds, it was gone. You couldn't see it. It was, and I didn't hallucinate. My family didn't hallucinate.
Yeah, and the time that it takes to witness, you don't have the opportunity to grab a camera. My granddaughter, we have bald eagles flying around here, and I've always wanted to take a picture of the bald eagles. But by the time that you see it, and the time it takes to grab your phone or your camera or whatever, that eagle's gone. And it's the same thing with a UFO. You don't have the time unless it's right there in your hand at that moment. When I lived in Sedona...
oh, how cool is that? You lived in Sedona?
Oh, yeah. I lived in Sedona for about 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And
that's a great place. They say there's a vortex there.
Oh, they've got 5 or 6 different vortexes there. And I used to live near the airport. There's a vortex near the airport, and I used to visit that one frequently. But anyhow, there's a store and a gas station. The store is Bash's. Have you been to Sedona?
No, I haven't. I've only flew over it, unfortunately.
Well, 89 runs right through Sedona, and the main store, kind of like Kroger's or whatever food market, it's called Bash's, and it's a strip mall, and me and my Reiki master were standing out on the porch, and the sidewalk, and it rained, it snowed, it hailed, like all within 5 minutes, and we walked out. We're standing there. We look up at the sky, and you could see what appeared to be an entire fleet dropping out of hyperspace. And you could only witness this for about 3 seconds. You would see the craft. It was like 100 craft. That fast. It was like, wow. And that was when I first got to Sedona. I said, this place is freaking awesome. I never want to leave. And I did leave. I couldn't handle some of the things that were going on there, and I had to just take my opinions and leave. But
well, isn't it around there somewhere where the Skinwalker Ranch is located?
Skinwalker, I don't know where Skinwalker Ranch is. I've never been there. I've always wanted to visit it, but I've never been there. And then they tell me that if I showed up there, I wouldn't be allowed there anyway.
Oh, well. Nothing like feeling loved, is there?
Yeah, nothing like feeling loved.
Well, it's certainly, I have found this out. If I found out anything this year that thrilled me more than, I just can't tell you how thrilled I am about this. I wondered why it seemed that certain people are more prone to experiencing paranormal events, okay? And I had a near-death experience when it was 2006. I was having surgery. They didn't know I had atrial fib, and so I ended up crossing over there for a little bit and came back because when I was out of my body, I just said, can I stay a little bit longer? There's things that I want to do. I haven't seen my grandchildren, so anyhow, I woke up, I was alive, and I noticed that after that, it seems like I was more sensitive, I was more intuitive, and I noticed more things that other people didn't really pay attention to. And a few months ago, I met a friend who had died 5 times in a horrific accident. Her only son was killed. All the people in the other vehicle were killed. She said that after that experience, she started becoming empathic, intuitive. She could feel strange entities in people, especially reptilian entities, if you know anything about that.
Yes,
but, she could talk with someone and almost like peer into their psyche a little bit. And I thought, well, that's weird. How could anybody do that? But, you know, she did it with me. She did it with other people that I referred to her. And I found out that once you have a near-death experience or an abduction, you release a chemical in your brain that changes the genetic makeup of your DNA. And it's sort of like it turns on your third eye. And right. you are more perceptive to these other realms.
I wouldn't call it turning on your third eye. I would more or less call it opening up your third eye.
Right.
The reason behind that is because that's the third eye is the entrance and exit of where the spirit may enter and leave the body. Mm-hmm. That when you go out of body, that's where you leave from, is your third eye. That's my opinion anyway. People can disagree with me all they want to.
Well, I agree with you because, you know, even though our physical bodies are in this world, our conscious body can be in the other place, in another world. You know, I have a friend, and she says sometimes I dream, and she said, and I'm not in my bed. She said, I feel like I'm soaring above my body, and I feel like I'm seeing things, and doors are being opened. She said, I just can't understand what it is. You know, our minds are so incredible. We have no idea what we as humanity are really capable of. I saw something a couple of weeks ago about a man. He can reach down and grab a hold of electrical currents, and it didn't bother him.
I'm the same way. It's funny that you should start talking about near-death experiences. In my early 20s, I had epilepsy, and I had died on the table 3 different times in 3 separate instances. The only experience that I can think of, that I can tell you about, the story I can tell you about, is that I would end up in the same room with the same old lady sitting in the same chair every single time. And she would tell me that I would have to come back, and I would argue with her that I didn't want to come back, that I was done with this life. This is after my child's death. And she would walk up to me and tap me on my forehead, and I would end up in the ER again. And I'd be cussing at the doctors and the nurses of, why'd you bring me back for?
Oh, wow. Well, listen, send me a request on Facebook, okay? Debra Jayne East.
All right. Either that or look up Black Swamp Radio.
Black Swamp, I sure will. Thank you so much. You have a good evening, and thanks for calling again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Are you there? Okay, well, he's not. Well, I will say this, Sam, because you are the second caller in the show, even though I'm not getting to speak to you, I am getting to look at your handsome face and your nice big 10-gallon hat. You are the winner tonight for
It's a big hat.
It's a big hat. It takes a big, confident guy to wear a hat like that, but he's from Texas. You know, everything is big in Texas. That's what they say, anyhow.
Don't mess with Texas.
Don't mess with Texas, but Sam keeps an eye out for me, and he helps me do some research on some different things that we spoke about. Always supportive, always shares my show, always, you know, he'll try to come to chat or whatever. So he's really very supportive, and that means a lot to people in radio when you have people out there helping you do the work. But he's not able to get through. But Sam, you won the copy of Derek Tyler's new book that'll be out in a few weeks called Alien Contact, The Difficult Truth, and he will sign it for you. So you just send me your address, and I will be sure to get that copy to you. I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight, and I apologize for all the roughness and everything, but, you know, this is my virgin plight here. And we've had a lot of stuff going on. Angel's had some things, and I was sick for a little bit, but I'm glad that we are on the road, and my guest next week is going to be Cece Stevens. If you've ever heard of the crystal skulls, she has 7 or 8 of them. And she also, her father helped to discover Billy Myers, if you know anything about Billy Myers. So she has a lot of interesting stuff. We're going to have Paul Sinclair over from the UK. He's got a book called The Truth That Leaves No Proof. He's a great investigator. We're going to have Daryl Sims. He's got something he just got notified of this week. He's going to go do some DNA testing. So we got all kinds of great stuff in store for you. Thank you for my solo run tonight, and I look forward to being back next week with my guest, C.C. Stevens. Everybody have a great weekend. This is Debra Jayne East signing off for PSN Radio.
Thank you for listening to Notes from the Underground with your host, Debra Jayne East. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook.